Hi, my name is Colton, and apparently they're just letting anyone do one of these, and this is gonna get political. Stick around, let me explain. Well, unless your name is Patrick Starr and you've been living under a rock the past month, you probably noticed the United States has a new president. Joe Biden was officially inaugurated last weekend. And as some sadly and some gratefully said goodbye to President Trump, he didn't escape the Oval Office without getting put in a peach a second time. I'm sorry, impeached. And while Trump sadly didn't have to fight his way out of a giant peach, he still made history as being the first president to be impeached twice during his presidency. And while I'm not saying he deserved or didn't deserve to be impeached, I know better than to have an opinion on the internet. Some of you may be wondering, well, if Donald Trump is the president, supposedly the most powerful man in the United States, how can he be impeached by people below him? Isn't he supposed to be the one in charge? Well, I know you're all excited to get a political lesson you didn't ask for. When the United States Constitution was actually written, they wrote in something called checks and balance. And basically what this law did was the three branches of the United States government, the judicial, the presidential, and the governmental, being the House and the Senate, could actually work together and balance each other out. This was a system created so that each group could hold the other one accountable if they broke laws or had an undemocratic term. This was written in the Constitution to ensure that none of the three branches could become too powerful or overthrow the others. It was meant to ensure a fair and safe democracy and ensure the protection of the Constitution of the United States. But does the Bible say anything about checks and balance? Well, the Bible doesn't say, "Thou shalt impeach thy orange man." The Bible actually does give us a list and requirements that kings are supposed to follow to ensure they remain faithful during their time. In what I like to call God's Declassified Ruling the Israelite Survival Guide, or better known as Deuteronomy 17, it actually lists out a list of requirements for kings to follow during their rule. A king is supposed to help the needy. They're not supposed to acquire too much wealth. The king is supposed to allow the righteous to flourish and judge people with righteousness. It says you're not supposed to enslave your own people. You're only supposed to have one wife. And finally, it says that all nations shall serve him. They even say you're not supposed to have too many horses. Now, before you horse girls come after me in the chat saying these requirements seem unfair, these requirements were given to us from God for our kings so that during their time of rule, they remained focused, didn't have any distractions, keep a balanced rule, and allowed their faithfulness to flourish with God. Now, if we flip forward to the book of Kings, we can see what happens when these requirements are ignored and balance is left out through the story of King Solomon the Wise. King Solomon was the successor to King David. Not Big Dog David, although I would give my life to serve him as a king, but actually David, the #1 overall Israelite pitcher, who slayed Goliath, who had ruled over Israel, and had actually done a pretty good job during his rule of uniting all the tribes of Israel. It would be kind of like in Canada if all the provinces weren't getting along, and we had this great and righteous ruler that united us back again. See, King Solomon was known as this wise, righteous, faithful, handsome, good-looking, eyes you can get lost in, hair that flows like an ocean. Sorry, I'm thinking of Brooks Bunting again. After David's rule and on his deathbed, he gives Solomon, his soon-to-be successor, a piece of advice. He says, always remain faithful. Now, Solomon knew that he had to remain faithful and knew all these requirements that were previously given him in Deuteronomy 17. And at the start of Solomon's rule, he was actually off to a really good start. Things were going good. He was being faithful to God and he was serving his people greatly. You often hear the story of King Solomon showing his wisdom with the story of the two babies, where Solomon threatens to cut a baby in half. If you want to go read that story, I swear it was the right decision, even though out of context it probably doesn't. But what happened in King Solomon's rule is as he went on, he lost that faithfulness with God as he started to break more and more of these requirements. See, King Solomon ended up breaking every single one of these requirements as he went on in his rule. He even ended up having too many horses. It's crazy, right? But he also married for political alliances and had more than one wife. He got power hungry and started accumulating way too much wealth. He even ended up enslaving his own people. And as more and more of these requirements were broken and balance was left off, Israel started to plummet. And after King Solomon, his successors followed in his line of breaking these requirements, and it actually led Israel almost right into the ground. Those requirements were meant to create balance in a king's rule so that he would not have any distractions from God and would be able to remain faithful. And I know you're probably sitting there wondering, well, those don't apply to me. I'm not going to be a king. And boy, I sure hope Owen Milne doesn't end up a king. But we still need to have requirements and balance for our own lives. See, balance is so important to have in our own lives. Because with school, social lives, our faith, and our downtime, they can sometimes feel like they're all competing to be the #1 overall draft pick and how we're going to spend that day. And it's important we create a balance in between them to live a healthy lifestyle. Odds are, if you spend all day playing Warzone, your grades are going to slip a bit. But odds are at the same time, if you spend your entire life just doing schoolwork and don't leave any time for your friends, family, or your hobbies, it's going to lead to an increase in stress and anxiety and unhealthy mental habits. When we focus on one thing too much than the other, it ends up drawing away from our relationship with God. There's all things in our lives we can change, all things in life we can implement to help better balance our life. So we can focus more on our relationship with God and build it. Because if we're not focusing on balancing the other things, it comes back on our relationship with God. So it's important to balance out schoolwork, your social life, your friends, and most importantly, it's important to balance out your faith. When you balance out all these things in life, you start to see improvements in yourself. You start to see your relationship grow. When you're setting apart time at the end of the day to spend with God, it grows your faith. But my challenge to you guys this week is think about what in your life you need to balance. Maybe you're spending too much time on Warzone. Maybe you're spending too much time looking at pictures of horses. Maybe you spend too much time all day on TikTok, like Asher. But think about one thing in your life you need to balance out. May it be focusing more on school, taking more time for yourself, or most importantly, maybe working on your relationship with God. Make sure you live a healthy and balanced lifestyle and try and come up with at least one thing you want to change and talk about it this week in your small group. Thank you for listening. And now that we're done with that, you guys want to see my renegade? Please cut it that as I stand up.